The lone ship appears. The galaxy had never seen anything like this before. The vast space between the stars was alive with the buzz of war, a constant hum of weapons charging and ships maneuvering. The aliens had come together in an alliance like never before, their fleets swelling, their armadas terrifying. They believed this would be the final war, the one that would decide the fate of the universe. Their target was Earth, the last human stronghold. And in the midst of it all, humans were thought to be all but defeated. The leaders of the alien forces, each one a giant in their own right, stood in their massive war room, watching the radar screens flash with the movements of their fleets. They were ready. They were prepared. All that remained was the final step, the annihilation of the human race, a simple mission. "Humanity is finished," said General Threx, an alien whose race had conquered countless worlds. His long, dark eyes glimmered with cruel satisfaction as he observed the data. "They think they still have hope." How quaint. But something caught his attention. A blip on the radar. It was a tiny speck, so small compared to the massive ships around it. The council of alien leaders fell silent as they watched the screen. This small object wasn't moving like any ship they knew. It didn't have the acceleration they were used to. It was different. A single human vessel. Threx scoffed. Are they truly that foolish? Where is their fleet? The council exchanged glances, some of them shaking their heads in disbelief. A lone human ship. The thought was laughable. Humans were supposed to be helpless, weak. They had no chance in this war, and certainly no fleet to send against such a powerful enemy. It was clear this was just a final act of desperation. General Threx sent a signal to his officers. "Prepare to obliterate this vessel. It's a waste of time." But as the ship drew closer, the alien leaders began to feel something they hadn't expected. Unease. They could not explain it. The ship was still just a speck in the vastness of space, but it seemed different. There was a coldness to it, an unnatural stillness. It was a ship, yes, but it wasn't like anything they had encountered before. Threx turned to his tactical officer. "What's its weapon signature?" The officer hesitated, his fingers tapping at the controls. "There's nothing, General. No weapons, no shields. It's completely silent, almost like it's not even registering on our systems." "That's impossible," Threx growled. "Everything registers. Find out what it is." The officer continued working, his hands flying across the console. But he couldn't explain it. The ship wasn't showing up as anything they understood. Its hull was smooth, like metal, but not the kind they had ever seen. Its energy output was minimal, just enough to keep it moving, but nothing more. It didn't send any signals, no radio chatter, no transmissions. It just drifted forward, a dark shadow moving through the stars. Threx growled in frustration, his fists tightening. This ship should have been easy to identify, to scan, to destroy. But the unknown nature of it was making his mind work overtime. The other aliens in the room looked at each other, uneasy. Then the voice came. It wasn't a loud voice, but it was clear, cutting through the stillness of space and echoing inside every ship. It was human, but the words felt different. "This is not a warship. This is your test." The words rang out in every alien vessel. A challenge, an offer, a declaration of something that the aliens weren't prepared for. The human ship didn't demand anything. It didn't make threats. It didn't say it was coming to fight. It simply spoke as if it already knew what was going to happen next. For a moment, there was nothing. Silence. Then the council erupted in confusion. "What does it mean?" asked one of the alien commanders, his voice trembling. Threx looked out into the vast emptiness, his mind racing. "It's toying with us. They're trying to get in our heads." But even as he said those words, he knew something deep inside him had changed. The ship hadn't attacked. It hadn't even moved to defend itself. It had simply spoken, and in that moment, it had made the most dangerous move of all. It had made the alien alliance question everything. Threx turned to his communications officer. "Send a message. Demand they respond. We need to know what they're playing at." The officer nodded and sent the signal. The words came back quickly, but not in the way the aliens expected. "You are not ready, but you will be. We are not your enemies. You are your own enemy." The words were cold, harsh, and yet they carried a weight, a warning that made every alien in the room freeze. No one had ever spoken like this to them. Certainly not humans. The ship remained still, its purpose unclear but undeniable. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't retreating. It simply existed, like a rock in the water, creating ripples that no one could explain. Threx clenched his fists, his mind spinning. The ship didn't seem to be a threat at all. But then why was it here? Why was it alone? Why had the humans sent only one ship? The question swirled in his mind like a storm, and for the first time, he wasn't sure whether to strike or to wait. The silence hung in the air like a dangerous secret, and for the first time in his life, Threx wasn't sure whether this would be a victory or something far, far worse. The one human ship remained still in the cold void of space, surrounded by thousands of alien warships. The aliens' disbelief continued to grow as the message from the lone ship echoed in their minds. It wasn't a declaration of war. It wasn't a desperate plea for help. It was a warning. In the war rooms of the alien fleet, chaos spread as they tried to process what had just happened. The leaders, who had never before questioned their overwhelming superiority, now found themselves facing a new and terrifying question. What if humanity wasn't as weak as they thought? Threx, the general of the alien forces, stood still, staring at the lone ship on the screen. The message had been chilling. "You are not ready, but you will be. We are not your enemies. You are your own enemy." There was a pause, a long, uneasy silence, before the alien commanders began to murmur amongst themselves. "What does this mean? What is the human ship trying to say?" One of the commanders asked, his voice laced with doubt. Threx snapped his gaze back to the screen, his mind trying to make sense of the strange message. His fingers twitched, itching for action. He hated being in the dark, and this human ship was doing just that, keeping them in the dark. "Don't just stand there. Get a response." Threx barked at his communications officer. The officer nodded nervously and sent another transmission. This time, their words were harsher, more demanding. "We have no time for games. Respond immediately or face the consequences." But there was no reply. The human ship sat there, silent, as if waiting. It felt as though time itself had stopped, as the aliens waited for something that seemed impossible to understand. How could this ship, just one ship, bring so much uncertainty? How could it silence their fleet, paralyze their decision-making? And then, without warning, the human ship began to move. Slowly at first, it began to turn. But there was no rush, no sudden burst of energy. It wasn't trying to escape or retreat. It was almost deliberate. The ship adjusted its course with eerie precision, and as it did, something changed in the air. The other ships around it seemed to grow tense, their weapon systems ready, their sensors scrambling to anticipate what might come next. But there was no aggression. The human ship simply moved. Threx watched with narrowed eyes, his gut telling him that something was deeply wrong. "What is it doing now?" The officer replied, still shaken. "It's not attacking, General. But it's not just sitting there anymore either. It's moving toward the center of our fleet." Threx could feel the sweat on his brow. "Is this some kind of trick? Or a test?" He muttered under his breath. He tapped his fingers on the table, deep in thought. Everything he had learned about human beings suggested they were unpredictable. They didn't fight like other races. Human strategies were often unconventional, even reckless. This ship's actions, or lack of them, were unsettling. The ship wasn't acting the way it was supposed to act. Another transmission came in. This time, the human voice was cold, even more chilling than before. "You are not here to win. You are here to learn. You will leave this battle with a lesson, whether you like it or not. Threx's jaw clenched. What kind of lesson was this human captain talking about? Why wasn't it just attacking? Why didn't it just destroy them like the humans were supposed to do if they wanted to survive? Send a fleet to surround it, Threx ordered. Force it into a corner. We'll see how it reacts then. His officers scrambled, and within moments, ships began to form around the lone human vessel. But instead of fleeing or fighting, the human ship simply slowed its approach and continued moving forward, as if it had all the time in the galaxy. "General, we've got an issue," the tactical officer said, his voice shaking. "We can't get a solid lock on the ship. It's almost like it's disrupting our systems. All of our weapons are malfunctioning." "What do you mean, malfunctioning?" Threx demanded. "It's like it's canceling out our technology," the officer explained. "The closer we get, the more our weapons shut down. Our shields are glitching too. It's like we've lost control of them." Threx's face paled. This was beyond anything he had expected. How is that possible? There's no way one ship can do this. He was wrong. One ship was doing this. The human ship wasn't just flying toward them. It was turning off their power. The closer they got, the more their technology seemed to break down. Their communication systems flickered, their weapons went dark, and the ships that were closest to the human vessel could barely hold their position in the void of space. It wasn't just a threat anymore. It wasn't just one ship defying them. It was one ship undermining their entire fleet. This can't be happening," muttered one of the commanders, watching as their weapons went offline one by one. "How can one ship have this kind of power?" Threx felt a cold chill run down his spine. His worst fears were becoming reality. The human ship was doing something to their ships, something they couldn't explain. He gritted his teeth. "No more delays. Launch all attack drones. We take this ship down now." But as the drones were deployed, something unexpected happened. The human ship didn't even flinch. It wasn't moving quickly, but it was still moving forward, calm and steady. The drones, despite being numerous, fizzled out in the blink of an eye, as if they had never been deployed at all. And once again, the voice from the human ship crackled through the communication systems, its tone colder than ever. "This is your final warning. Turn back now." The arrogance of the alien fleet began to crumble. What had they underestimated? What had they missed? What were humans truly capable of? The alien fleet, once confident in their overwhelming numbers, now found themselves shaken by a single human ship. The silence in the war rooms was deafening as the fleet commanders watched in disbelief. Their own technology, their weapons, their strategies, they were all being rendered useless by this lone vessel. A growing realization dawned on them. They were losing control. Threx, the alien general, clenched his fists. His confidence had been shattered, replaced with frustration and a deep sense of fear. He had spent his entire life commanding fleets, destroying civilizations, and conquering worlds. But this human ship, it was different. It wasn't running from them. It wasn't trying to negotiate. It was simply undoing everything they had worked for. He slammed his fist onto the console. "How is this possible?" he growled, his voice echoing in the war room. "What kind of technology are they using?" The communications officer, who had been trying to establish contact with the human ship, looked up nervously. "General, I've been analyzing their transmissions. They're not using anything we recognize. It's like they're operating on a completely different frequency, one that we can't even decode properly." Threx's eyes narrowed. "So we're flying blind, then, and they are making us look like fools." A pause filled the room as his officers exchanged uneasy glances. The alien fleet had always prided itself on its technological superiority. They had destroyed countless civilizations, wiped out entire fleets with ease, and crushed every enemy in their path. But this wasn't a war they had prepared for. One of the officers spoke up hesitantly. "General, what if we're not dealing with normal humans? What if they've developed something Something beyond our understanding. The thought sent a shiver down Threx's spine. Beyond our understanding. Yes, that's the only explanation that makes sense. But how do we fight something we don't understand? As if answering his question, the human ship suddenly shifted its position, sending shockwaves through the fleet's formation. It wasn't fast, just a subtle change in direction, but it was enough to send several alien warships drifting off course, their engines sputtering as the human ship's mysterious influence continued to weaken their systems. "Attack now," Threx bellowed. "All ships, move in. Surround it. If it's a trick, we'll crush it." But it was too late. Before the fleet could even adjust their positions, the human ship deployed a wave of energy unlike anything they had ever seen. The attack came suddenly, with no warning. A massive burst of electromagnetic force shot out from the human vessel, slicing through space like a hot knife through butter. The alien ships, caught off guard, were struck by the energy wave. Shields that had been considered indestructible flickered and sputtered. The mighty weapons that had been poised for a devastating strike fell silent. A few ships exploded outright, torn apart as if they were nothing more than fragile toys in the hands of a child. Others were crippled, their engines shut down, leaving them stranded and vulnerable. The once confident fleet was now thrown into disarray. Panic spread quickly among the ranks. The mighty alien warships were no match for the mysterious power that came from the human ship. And in that moment, the fleet's arrogance crumbled. They had underestimated humanity. And now, they were paying the price. "Retreat," shouted one of the commanders, but his voice was drowned out by the chaos around him. The alien fleet was no longer a well-organized force. It was a scattered, terrified mess. But the human ship wasn't done. As the alien ships began to retreat, trying to regroup and recover, the human ship continued its relentless advance. With eerie precision, it picked off the weakest ships one by one, sending them into a spiral of destruction. No one had seen this coming. Not the fleet, not the generals, and certainly not Threx. As one of the last remaining alien ships attempted to flee, the human ship fired once more. This time, the attack was different. It wasn't an energy wave, but a missile. A single, small missile that moved with frightening speed. The alien ship tried to evade, but it was too slow. The missile struck its hull, a piercing explosion tearing through its defenses. The ship's core detonated, and in an instant, it was nothing more than debris floating in space. Threx watched in horror as one of his strongest ships was destroyed with such ease. His hands trembled as he stared at the screen, watching the last of his fleet scatter. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was a massacre. The human ship, still moving slowly but steadily, drifted toward the center of the fleet. The once proud alien forces were in full retreat now, unable to stop what was happening. And through all of it, the voice from the human ship came through again, cold and unemotional, echoing in the minds of the fleet commanders. "This is the lesson. The war is over." Threx stood there, paralyzed by a mix of anger and fear. The war was over, but not in the way he had imagined. He had expected to crush humanity, to show them their place in the galaxy. But now, they had been humbled. They had been defeated by one ship. He couldn't believe it. He had underestimated humanity. The humans weren't just survivors. They were engineers, engineers of destruction. The general closed his eyes and took a deep breath. It was over. But he couldn't escape the feeling that they had just opened a door they weren't prepared to walk through. Humanity had shown them their worst nightmare. And now, Threx had to face the consequences of that mistake. The aliens had thought they were in control, but one human ship had changed everything. The retreating alien fleet drifted through the cold emptiness of space, fragmented and desperate. Their commanders, once filled with pride and certainty, now grappled with the harsh reality that they had underestimated a species they had considered weak. They had thought their superior numbers, their advanced technology, and their mighty ships would crush the humans in a matter of minutes. Instead, They were on the run, fleeing from a single human ship that had already torn through their defenses. Threx stood before the holographic display in his war room, his expression hard and unreadable. Around him, his most trusted commanders exchanged hushed whispers. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and no one dared to speak too loudly. For the first time in his career, Threx felt uncertain. His reputation had been built on victory, on absolute control over every battle he had ever fought. And now he found himself at the mercy of a human ship, a ship that seemed to be everywhere at once. His mind raced. What had gone wrong? The humans had used an unknown weapon, something his ships couldn't even comprehend. It had taken out entire fleets with brutal efficiency, and now their forces were scattered. His best ships were gone, torn apart with ease, and the rest of his fleet was crippled and demoralized. "General," one of his officers spoke up cautiously, breaking the silence. "We are receiving another transmission from the human ship." Threx's gaze sharpened. The nerve of these humans. Even after what they had done, they were still sending messages. His heart pounded with frustration, but his curiosity overpowered his anger. "Put it through," he ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, and once again, the cold, emotionless voice of the human ship echoed throughout the war room. "This is the final warning. Cease your attacks. Return to your homeworlds. The galaxy is not yours to claim." Threx's teeth ground together as he listened to the calm, unwavering voice. It felt like an insult, a reminder of their failure. Every fiber of his being screamed for revenge. He could not let this stand. He would not let this stand. He turned to his officers. "Are the reinforcements ready?" "Yes, General," one of his officers responded. "We've managed to reroute backup ships. A fleet is on its way. We will have enough to overwhelm them." Threx's eyes glinted with renewed determination. The humans may have destroyed his fleet, but they hadn't destroyed his will. He would finish this, no matter the cost. He would bring the galaxy to its knees, and the humans would pay the price for their arrogance. Meanwhile, aboard the human ship, Captain Morgan stood at the helm, gazing out into the black void of space. The quiet hum of the ship's engines was a reminder of how alone they were. The alien forces might have been shattered for now, but the humans knew this victory would not last forever. The rest of the galaxy had seen what had happened. The alien fleet, crippled by one ship, would not forgive them. They would retaliate. Morgan's brow furrowed. What was their next move? The ship's sensors had picked up the incoming alien reinforcements. They were already on their way. And this time, they wouldn't be caught off guard. "Captain," Lieutenant Harris called from across the room, "we've detected a large fleet approaching at high speed. It's the reinforcements." Morgan turned to face her. His face was grim. "How much time do we have?" "Not long," she replied. "We can hold them off for a while, but we'll need to be ready." Morgan nodded, his mind racing. The battle had just begun. He had known from the start that humanity's position in the galaxy would never be secure. But they had proven something important. They had proven that humans were not to be underestimated. Now, it was time to show the aliens just how dangerous they could be. "Prepare for battle," Morgan ordered. "Get the shields up, and make sure every weapon is locked and loaded. This time, we don't back down." Back in the alien war room, Threx was preparing for the final confrontation. His fleet, while damaged, was still capable of destroying the human ship. He would make them pay for what they had done. He would make them suffer. The human ship had been a fluke, a lucky strike. It had taken down one fleet. But now, Threx would bring the full force of the alien armada against them. The human ship would be destroyed, and their race would learn its place in the galaxy. "Communications," Threx barked. "Contact all ships. Prepare for engagement. The time for retreat is over." The officer nodded, his face pale but resolute. "Yes, General." The alien ships moved into position, their massive weapons charging, ready to unleash their devastating firepower on the lone human ship. But what the aliens didn't realize was that humanity had a different kind of strength. They weren't just using their weapons, they were using their minds, their ability to adapt and think on their feet. This wasn't a simple victory for the humans. This was the beginning of something much bigger. The human ship, though smaller and outgunned, was no longer just a single vessel. It was a symbol of human ingenuity, a symbol that even the most powerful forces in the galaxy couldn't crush. As the alien fleet prepared for their assault, Captain Morgan stood firm at the helm. "We fight for humanity. We fight for every world, every home, every life that's ever been taken from us. We don't back down." The countdown to the next battle had begun, and the galaxy would never forget what it was about to witness. The vastness of space was filled with the roar of engines and the crackling hum of weapons charging. On one side, the alien fleet loomed, its ships massive and imposing, their dark hulls gleaming under distant stars. On the other side, there was only one ship, the human ship, a vessel small in comparison, but brimming with determination and fierce resolve. Captain Morgan stood at the helm, eyes locked on the approaching alien forces. His heart raced, but his mind was calm. This was the moment they had prepared for. The moment humanity would prove they were not to be underestimated. "All systems are ready, Captain," Lieutenant Harris reported. She stood by his side, her expression focused. The hum of the ship's engines and the whirring of machinery were the only sounds that filled the tense silence of the control room. Morgan nodded. "Maintain course. Don't fire unless I give the order." The countdown began. On the alien side, the fleet had gathered into formation. The sight of the enormous ships, lined up in perfect symmetry, was a sight to behold. Their weapons charged and ready, their war machines built for destruction. This was a show of force like none other, meant to instill fear into the heart of humanity. The aliens had prepared for a quick and decisive strike, confident in their ability to overwhelm the human vessel. But what they didn't know was that the human ship had something they couldn't predict: strategic thinking. As the alien fleet neared, Morgan gave the command. "All hands, braced for impact." Suddenly, the human ship surged forward with surprising speed. The alien ships fired their first salvo, a series of massive plasma bursts that blazed across the cold void of space. But to their confusion, the human ship expertly dodged each strike, weaving and shifting through space with incredible agility. It wasn't a fast ship by any means, but it was quick enough to make the aliens' attacks miss. The alien fleet was taken aback. They had expected to simply crush the human ship in moments. Instead, they were left firing at nothing but empty space. "Focus on the human ship," Frex barked, his voice full of fury. "Don't let it escape again." But the human ship wasn't trying to escape. It was setting the trap. Morgan had studied the alien fleet's movements, had analyzed their attack patterns, and now he was using their overconfidence against them. The human ship darted between the alien vessels, using their size against them, slipping through the cracks in their formation. The alien fleet's sheer size became their weakness as the human ship squeezed into the spaces between their ships, where their weapons couldn't track fast enough. "Targeting locked," Lieutenant Harris said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Ready to fire." Morgan glanced at the control panel, and his finger hovered over the button. The plan was simple: use the alien ship's momentum to guide them into their own destruction. "Fire," Morgan ordered. The human ship's weapons fired, sleek and precise. A brilliant beam of energy shot out from the ship's core, striking an alien vessel in the flank. The ship shuddered as its shields cracked under the force, but it didn't explode. Not yet. A second shot came quickly after, striking the same ship at a vulnerable point. The alien ship lurched, its engines sputtering. And then, with a thunderous explosion, it broke apart, scattering debris across the battlefield. "Direct hit," Harris exclaimed. "One down." The alien fleet was in shock. Their advanced technology, their superior numbers, were no match for the speed and strategy of the human ship. The humans weren't just fighting. They were outsmarting them at every turn. "Captain, they're regaining formation," Lieutenant Harris warned. "They're coming in for another attack." Morgan's eyes narrowed. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. The aliens would fight back harder now, and they were going to do everything they could to destroy the human ship. But he wasn't worried. He knew the human ship was outmatched in raw firepower. However, the one thing they had over the aliens was something far more important: the will to fight. As the alien ships closed in again, the human ship used the debris from the destroyed ship as cover, weaving through the wreckage to confuse the aliens. The alien fleet struggled to maintain their cohesion, and for the first time, their formation was faltering. They were losing their advantage. But the aliens weren't done yet. They deployed a new tactic: smaller, faster ships that darted between the larger warships, trying to flank the human vessel from all sides. These were their elite fighters, designed for speed and precision, and they were closing in fast. Morgan watched the swarm of alien fighters approach. There was no way to dodge them all. "Prepare to engage the fighters," he ordered, his voice calm. The crew responded quickly, switching to the defensive weapons and activating countermeasures. The human ship's turrets began to fire rapidly, taking out some of the alien fighters. But there were too many. One of the small ships managed to slip past, and before anyone could react, it fired on the human ship's rear engines, causing the ship to shudder violently. "Damage report," Morgan snapped. "We've sustained minor damage to the rear thrusters," Harris replied quickly, her voice tense. "We can still maneuver, but we need to act fast before they get another hit." Morgan's mind raced. They couldn't afford to be hit again. If they lost their mobility, they would be sitting ducks. "All power to the front shields," he ordered. "Get us in position for another strike." The human ship angled itself toward the center of the alien fleet, aiming to break their formation wide open. Then, with incredible precision, the human ship fired again, this time striking the largest alien ship head-on. The explosion was enormous, sending shockwaves throughout the battlefield. The alien fleet's morale hit a new low as their flagship crumbled into debris. "Direct hit, Captain," Harris shouted. The aliens were reeling now, their formations shattered, their morale broken. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. But the battle was far from over. The remaining alien ships regrouped, but they knew they had been outsmarted by a race they had once fought beneath them.